If we're talking about women in leadership here, I mean, that's one of the pieces of the puzzle to this story. We can actually talk about what COVID taught us as it relates to women and how they led the countries around the world. There are female presidents and female prime ministers that actually did a really good job during COVID of navigating the situation. So I think that we can share the other side of this, where there are countries around the world. Like take the Nordic region, for example. 4 out of those 5 countries have females as their president or their top leader.
Yeah. Yeah, the Nordic region was fascinating and just kept coming up in so many places on this journey. I mean, historically, social policy, they're pretty far ahead, and they come up on many of the global indices as having the smallest gender gaps on a lot of fronts. They also come up on the happiness indices over and over and over again as the top places. So they kept coming up, and I definitely explored their social policy choices that have helped close these gaps and what those mean. But it was really fascinating to see. So 4 out of 5, as you mentioned, leaders in the Nordic region are women. And the one country that is in the Nordic region that doesn't have a female leader is Sweden. And there were plenty of points in time in the numbers game of where COVID was surging and where COVID was under control, that those 4 countries led by women had it under control, and Sweden did not. So, I'm very careful to say in the book that this is not like women nailed it in leadership and men failed miserably.
Right. But it's something to look up to. It's something to look up to as a form of, hey, there's a capability there. I mean, just the same way, if you're a young girl right now, you can look up to the fact that there are now 5 full-time female NBA referees. The first one was Violet Palmer in 1997. And then the NBA went through a long stretch where they didn't have female refs. And ever since 2014, they brought in 5. So these small, as you say, inches in a marathon could eventually compound to where we make a matriarchy.
Yeah. And, I think that nuance, that like looking around for this type of stuff and seeing it, but then also watching for the impact is really important. And what we learned out of the COVID stuff, there are plenty of great leadership stories. I think I made sure to balance in the book. Taiwan also had really amazing numbers in their response to COVID, and they have a male president. So it's not just that, and that's what I really want to come through. And I think that is some people's knee-jerk reaction when I say make the matriarchy. You're like, okay, so you just want women to rule the world, right? Like, go away, stop existing. And I'm like, no, I want us to look at what are the leadership qualities that are making women successful, that are making more inclusive places successful, and that we all lean into those instead of the power systems of patriarchy that we're used to and we often default to when we create systems and structures.
It seems to be about expanding definitions of competence. So I think for a long time there was a prototypical, ideal, disagreeable type A, highly conscientious, which may be a good thing, but the disagreeable type A part, that was maybe a dispensable part of the ideal worker. But that really was the vision for who we want our leaders to be. And I think people like that can thrive in leadership roles, but I think moving forward, it really is about expanding our definitions of competence, both at the level of the highest leadership in the land and at the level of organizations of mid to small companies as well.
Yeah. And it's amazing. I heard you, tuck the ideal worker in there, which is a concept that came up in here too. But just even as you described that, like when we think about our own work experiences, like who likes working for that type A hard driver? Like nobody does.
Yeah.
So, it is about busting up this bias of like, well, but that's the person at the top. So that's what it takes to succeed. And to be clear, something else I mentioned, there are plenty of women who lead that way, who have, modeled their leadership after these patriarchal power over others systems. Again, it's not about men versus women. It's about systems and bias of what we think is the way things have to be, which is power over others, power to get to the top, as opposed to looking at what are the leadership qualities that we enjoy working for. Well, it's usually like empathy and leading with heart and flexibility and humility, and looking at those leadership qualities and redefining what we think, deserves to be at the top, deserves to be in leadership.
Mm-hmm.